Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Buckeye Breakdown. Owen Smith, Matthew Warner here. It is game week, but of course, before we get into all of that, we are coming off another top five win with the win on Saturday over the controversial Indiana Hoosiers. I think across all of college football, how good were they? Really heading into that, Saturday was their first, I would say, true test. We were able to watch that, recap that, and that's the point of today's episode. So, Matt, another top five win for Ryan Day. Update the graphic. I think it's 3-7, 4-7 now. So,
Yeah,
update the graphic before people discredit it. How are you feeling?
I feel good. Obviously, there were some jitters going into this game, but I think you and I kind of shared. We felt pretty confident that just from a talent perspective at home, knowing the stakes, like we felt pretty confident in the Buckeyes. And then we had another one of those, like, seems like it's kind of the team's MO. We had the slow start. You and I were ready to fire everybody, start from scratch, as we always are at about 12:25 on Saturdays. But outside of that first possession from Indiana, they just got absolutely nothing going. It was just pretty much dominance from that point on. Guys coming up with big plays in different areas that we haven't seen all year. So to me, it was a win in dominant fashion against a good football team. Like
Yeah.
people are trying to discredit IU already. That of course, the first time they see a good football team, this is what it looks like. It's like, yeah, they played the number 2 team in the country on the road, and if it weren't for a botched snap, there's a real chance we're going into the half tied up at 7-7.
Oh, yeah.
Like that's where we were. Everybody wants to kind of discredit everything that they've done, based off of this, single performance. But that's a top 5 win. And I still think IU is pretty good. They still control their destiny. And I believe they belong in the 12 team playoff, and think they'll find themselves there with the SEC kind of helping out a little bit right now. So I feel good. I mean, I don't know how you're feeling now that we've slept on it. It is tough to come on and like, all right, let's talk about this game, knowing what's this week is. And it seems to be the motto of the Buckeyes right now of like, don't care, don't want to talk about that. We are solely focused on that team up north. So how are you feeling a couple days removed, now that you've had a chance to kind of sit back and think about the game, seen some other matchups over the weekend? Like, where's your head at?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Buckeyes second. I mean, I think one or two, right? The second first best team in the league or in college football. I think they played like it. I think that they certainly made mistakes, things that you need to clean up, right? You can't. I think some of the play calling and some of the early decisions that made it a close game are certainly need to be cleaned up, because when the margins are thinner, like that's gonna bite you in the ass, right? But it's hard. I think that's my only maybe Iggy, which we'll get to. Like, there's only like 2 small concerns, but overall, like, very happy with the performance. I think a lot of people showed out pretty well. I think that this is the team that I would, maybe easy to say now, but like, this is the best version of the Buckeyes that we've seen since Justin Fields and the 2020, 2019 Buckeyes, right? So I think that this, yeah, I just have a high amount of confidence in this team, but there is a lot of football ahead of us. And like, I'm not getting too enjoying the win, but like, this week, regardless of what the spread is, regardless of what the record is, all of that, like, this game is always going to be extremely difficult, and then it's not going to get any easier after that. Nope. With a rematch either in Indianapolis or whatever the college football playoffs bring us. So, yeah, enjoyed it, but now I'm like full kind of in game mode, game week mode, and just like cautiously optimistic, but like cautious, very cautious with it.
So something about the game, and I briefly brought it up, but I'm curious your thoughts on it. Like, I mentioned it's kind of been the MO of like this small or slow start, feel it out kind of play from the Buckeyes, both offensively and defensively. I feel like in the past, the Buckeyes' first offensive possession almost always felt like 7 points. Like before we even got out there, you knew that Ryan Day was going to have scripted 7 to 10 plays that were going to be really effective. This is now back-to-back top 5 matchups where we've turned it over and got scored on in our first possession. So we started off down 10-0, started off against Penn State. We started off down 7-0 against IU. I think there's a lot to say about this team and the leadership that comes from guys like Will Howard and Cody Simon on both sides of those balls that are kind of leading those units that say, okay, let's just, let's go get it back. Let's keep fighting. But is there any concern from your side of like, there's always the possibility that like you get yourself in this hole and then you make another dumb play and like the hole gets bigger, where this year it's kind of been like small hole, climb out of it, you're good. Is there any concern from your side of like these slow starts when you start looking at some of the teams they may play, like in Oregon or some of these SEC teams in the 12-team playoff? Like any concern from your side on the start from the Buckeyes that has you maybe less optimistic about their national championship hopes at this point?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that's just overall number one concern for the rest of the season is in the smallest margin game that you've played this year, you did score on the first drive, right? And so like that's promising, but like if you didn't score, what would that game have looked like, right?
Yep.
Like we still lost that game, and it could have been worse if you don't go march down. I have it pulled up, 10 plays, 75 yards, 5 minutes off the clock, right? Like if you pull a first drive like you did with IU, or they literally took off not even 2 minutes, I think it was like a minute and a half maybe. You give Oregon the ball, like it doesn't matter where you're at, right? Whether you're in Lucas Oil Stadium or you're in the national championship when you face them again or whatever it is, like you're giving them the ball and basically, not taking advantage of that possession, because guess who gets the ball at halftime, right?
Yeah.
So that's the concern. Now, again, they've proven that they can do it in those games, right? But yeah, you have 2 back-to-back examples. I think it shows a lot, to your point, of like what this team can do. Like you're never out of it, right?
Yeah. There's the flip side where you don't get yourself in the hole in the first place, and then like you're by far the best third quarter team in the country. Like I saw somebody say something like, if there's any betting advice I could give anybody ever, it's bet the spread of the Buckeyes third quarter. Like they're lights out. They go into halftime, they make adjustments. Like I think the encouraging thing is like, if you don't get yourself in the hole, you don't throw the pick 6 against Penn State, you don't, have a dud of a drive and then, fall short on a goal line stand against IU. Like those games are much uglier than we even made them out to be. But I do have the, same with you. It is concerning of like, eventually, it's going to come to a spot where it's like, you can't really get yourself out of these holes every single time and find yourself back on top. And Oregon, like you said, was a good example of like offense came out, clicked right away. And it was like, you needed to have that happen or that game could have got ugly pretty quick.
Yep.
So that's the one concern I have. And I don't think you and I are alone in that. So, outside of the slow start, very dominant. And I mentioned a little bit like guys making plays in areas that, we haven't seen in a while. So let's talk about, are you familiar with number 2 on Ohio State? He plays safety, but he also started doing punt returns this year a little bit.
Did he transfer from Alabama?
Yeah, I don't know
Is
if
that
you
like,
know
is that
he's
his
an
name
Alabama.
calling card? Yeah.
I don't know if you know he's an Alabama transfer.
My God.
So, a massive play in the third quarter to kind of give the Buckeyes some pretty good breathing room. Up 14-7 at that point after the botched punt from IU going into the half. We score 21 seconds left. Get a quick stop out of the half, and then Caleb Downs does Caleb Downs things. We've seen him be electric on the defensive side of the football all year. We talked about it early on. Like, is there a world where Caleb Downs is involved in the punt return game? That has started to happen. We get our first punt return touchdown in 10 years?
Yeah, 2014. Yep.
10 years. So that when that happened, and you can tell me if you feel any different, but when that happened, I was like, game's over.
Oh yeah, because
there's no coming back. Like the stadium just absolutely erupted. Which another thing we can get into is just how well the Buckeyes showed up. Buckeye fans, I should say, showed up and made things difficult for IU. But when that happened, I kind of relaxed in my couch a little bit and was like, all right, like we're in a good spot. We're perfectly fine now. So tell me about your kind of thoughts on one, the play, but then also I see you have some notes here. Like, is there more coming in terms of like what Caleb Downs is capable of outside of even just punt returns?
First off, play. Yeah, I mean, same feelings that you had. It's like, if we're also going to get it done on special teams, on back-to-back special teams plays, like the defense is gelling, the offense is gelling. Like, yeah, if we're also going to get it done on this level, and Blurry Matt is just making a huge.
Yeah, I was going to say he got just keep going in and out.
But it's like, if this is also going to be working for us, there's no chance IU wins the game. And I need to do this more. I need to go back. I wear an Apple Watch, big flex. I thought about going to Garmin for a while, but clearly it monitors your heartbeat. I would love to see what my heart rate looked like from like 12-16 when the game like kicked off to that moment, because it would have elevated, and then I would have been the most calm I've been that entire game after that moment. Because I just felt like we were in full control at that point. But yeah, I think that, and I put it on our the show notes, is like, okay, we are now in November. We're almost in December. We are in the final regular season game. There was some off-season talk of like Caleb Downs getting some reps at offense. Again, that could have been a recruiting pitch to come to Ohio State over Georgia or whatever it may have been. But there was discussion, right? And when you see a guy make that type of play, and there's been that discussion, and it is the game that has held you back 3 years in a row now, do we see Caleb Downs finally get a rep at offense? Do we mess around? Because this is the time to do it, right? Yes, I understand you kind of throw everything out with the rivalry, but it is a 20-point spread. You're not going to get this. Well, actually, if you're the 5 seed, you'll get this again. But we're not hoping for the 5 seed. So this is going to be the largest margin. This is a game that has owned you for 3 years. You got to find every single competitive advantage, minus going to opposing games and recruiting from the stands and all of that.
Yeah.
But you have to find every single competitive advantage that you can legally. And I think Caleb Downs on the offense could help. Not that there's a lack of talent with Quinshawn and Trevion and Emeka and Jeremiah and Carnell and need I say more, but
just keeps going.
It's just like,
going. Yeah.
I mean, listen, it electrifies the stadium, which is what you need.
Yeah.
That's just another element that, Ohio Stadium has definitely at times felt pretty quiet, and not that I think that that's going to be a concern with this week, but just an extra thing to juice him up. Do you think that that's even a possibility, or do you think we'll just keep it to a return game, be happy with what we have, and he's also just going to be a menace on the defense as well?
I think there is a stronger likelihood of it happening next week versus it suddenly coming out in like the Big Ten championship or like the playoffs. I think if we're going to see anything, you're going to see it next week. And I don't know what it looks like. I don't know if it's a decoy. Like, I don't know if it's truly like, we really have faith that if Caleb Downs has the ball in his hands, he can make really big plays happen. I think it depends on how, the first 2 drives go for Ohio State. Like, and what I mean by that is if we come out, everything's firing, you go score on your first 2 drives. Like, I think it's likely he may see the field as like hey, we've got a little bit of a cushion. Let's try and get this like explosive play, get the stadium, like step on their throats early. That brings a really good verse. Like, if we're struggling early on, I don't know if you like, because we have weapons everywhere and because nothing's necessarily broken on the offensive side of the ball, like that's when I don't know if you're like, let's try it out when things are still close or, not in a super comfortable spot where like we can get a little finicky with the offense. Like, that's how I see it playing out. But either way, I think this would be the week that you have a possibility of like, you look out there and you're like, who is that? Who is that guy? And it's Caleb Downs in the offensive jersey, because he can't wear 2.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think it's like he was on a kick return once. I want to say it was like 17 or not even 17. It was 19 maybe or something like that.
It was the
I know. Yep. We'll forget what play it was, but yeah. Speaking of every competitive advantage you can get, but I will slightly disagree. I think you have to do it when it can truly, like, even if it's early, even if it's the first or second drive, like, I think the game still has to be in the balance a little bit. And like, just if you're going to put Caleb Downs on offense, like take full advantage of it. Cause if it's going to be, kind of a later game or it's out of the balance, it's like, why didn't you do it against Iowa? Right. Yeah. Like,
and the reason I'm saying that is like, I think, we've talked about Ryan Day's kind of, maybe the one area he is at fault is like, he believes in his guys so much that like, I worry of Ryan Day early on in this game, knowing what's happened the last 3 years of not being like, I'm going to take Carnell Tate off the field, or I'm going to take Travion or Quinshon off the field and put Caleb Downs in when, like, without a shadow of a doubt, he has 100% faith in those guys. The way I see it is like, they go do their job, and then Ryan Day's like, let's fuck around and find out like what this thing can do. So the other question, and let's, won't spend too much more time on this, but what if he does go in and sees 2 touches and makes big plays? Like, is this okay, now we've got Caleb Downs who is showing he can play both sides of the ball. Like, I'm not saying it's going to be a Travis Hunter situation, like snap wise, just because of, how many weapons we do have. But like, does that then become this like Swiss Army knife that Ryan Day and Chip Kelly have to like really make teams think as we go into Big Ten championship and college football playoffs, where like they haven't seen it all year. And now all of a sudden they're like, shit, we've got this other guy who may play 10 to 12 snaps, on the offensive side of the football. And now we've got to figure this out. Or do you think it's just something they do and then we like maybe see it very sporadically throughout the rest of the college football playoffs?
I think you make the plays happen in this game and then you put him in more as the decoy moving forward.
Yeah.
Or if something breaks, right? Because then you're having to worry about Jeremiah Smith. Again, I won't go through the whole list, but you're having to worry about these guys, and then you also like don't have as much film on what they do with Caleb Downs. But there are a couple plays where you do have it. Just makes you think, makes you prepare a little extra. And so I think you make a splash happen in this game, and then you maybe use it more as a decoy moving forward, because also like we need Caleb Downs on defense in these games. Like he is the difference maker on the defense. So like we can't risk anything, and we also don't want him, being out of breath after, having to gets an 80-yard touchdown and then
Yeah.
has to go back out and defend, some of Ryan Williams. Well, I guess Alabama may not be in it, but like has to go defend a solid
Why wouldn't they
offense.
be in it?
Well, they might be. I mean, God, they may lose this weekend and still make it. I don't know, but
The graphic going up immediately of like, does a 3-loss Alabama team deserve to be in? It's like they just lost 24-3 against a 500 really bad Oklahoma team. What are we talking about? Defensively, you and I talked about, going into this game, if there was one area that we were a little nervous about, it was the DB room. With Iggy being very prone to drawing, penalties, and Burke, coming off of the Oregon game and not really being exactly the guy he was last year. I think early on, we were spot on to be, to be nervous. Iggy with 2 flags on the first possession.
yes.
It just felt like they were picking on, like truly felt like they were like, if we just run aggressive routes against that guy, he can't keep up with us. He's going to hold us. He's going to, he's too aggressive. And obviously it hurt us. After that, it was not a very easy game for Curtis Rourke and that passing offense. And a lot of that comes from the pressure that we were able to get. But I also just don't think there were a ton of opportunities for Curtis Rourke to find open guys. And I think you have to give a lot of credit to Iggy and Denzel for giving Jim Knowles or having Jim Knowles have enough confidence to send those things says that he trusts those 2 guys. And they, and I think that it worked really well on both sides. So, how are you feeling about the defensive back room now that we're past this top 5 matchup against an offense that had been playing pretty damn good throughout the year? How are you feeling now, not necessarily going into Michigan where we don't, expect to see a ton of like offensive passing prowess, but heading it back into like a potential Oregon rematch or some of these more high-powered offenses that we may see in a 12 team. Like, where's your head at right now with our defensive back room?
I think, you have to give Iggy a lot of credit for the latter half of the game, but I am a little worried, but I do think that like the coach, that's where the coaching comes in, and you have to go, okay, they're going to pick on Iggy. We got to put Jermaine in for a few drives, which they did a little bit. I can't remember what I think it was maybe the 3rd drive, maybe when they rotated him in, but and I think same thing goes for Burke, right? If he's getting torched like he was in Oregon game, like, okay, rotate him in. Like, I think you have 3 solid guys for 2 positions. And I think that, to your point, as long as they're not throwing the damn ball to Iggy, it's like, okay, he's gonna do his thing. But when they throw it, it's like, oh my God, please just. I know he's aggressive. You're not gonna change that, but it is just like, when is that gonna screw? Good thing it's not a spot foul, but like it is a big.
It's a big momentum, shift. It's a first down. It's. I think from a confidence perspective, you get one of those and then all of a sudden you're like a little bit more hesitant to be aggressive, which, leaves you a little bit more vulnerable. What was funny about some of them, and they were penalties, but like we joked last week of like, holy shit, these refs are letting them play like very aggressive. There were multiple times where I was like, that probably could have been a penalty. And like Northwestern wasn't any different. They were doing a lot of the same things. And then this week it was like, you get called on 2 in the first possession. It's like, those were 2 that kind of got let go last week in some areas. So I think there's something to be said about the officiating too. Ohio State has the least amount of penalties called on them or called for them in the Big Ten. Like, they're not getting the benefit of the doubt in a lot of these. Like the prime example was, right before the pick that Will Howard threw, Jeremiah Smith on a fade route where like the guy's just got his jersey as he's going up for the ball, and it would have been a ridiculously tough catch without getting held. But like that's what they were calling against Ohio State, and they didn't get it. So, the one thing the other thing, like, did you hear Denzel Burke's name at all
Nope.
on Saturday?
Nope. That is a very good thing for the most part.
Yeah, that's a good thing. Like, if people aren't throwing at you, that is good. It means you're doing your job. And we mentioned the DBs were able to get kind of this turnaround after that tough first possession, and a lot of that was because of what Jim Knowles was able to create, and the pressure that we were able to get on the quarterback. Do you think that is going to be kind of the new recipe for success? Obviously, getting to the quarterback and sacking him 5 times is obviously a good recipe for success, but it seemed like Jim Knowles was much more aggressive and like, we're going to send some heat. We're going to trust our guys on the outside to cover. And if we don't get home, we can live with a 10-yard pass, to a guy going across the middle versus, playing really soft coverage and letting him pick you apart down the field, not getting any pressure. Do you think that's going to be more consistent? Because we just haven't seen that all year. It seems like these last couple weeks, it's been more ramped up in terms of like Jim Knowles is like, let's send guys, let's send different guys, let's send different looks, and let's let's make some things happen. So do you think that's going to be more of the MO, moving forward?
I think so, but I think it comes down to, and maybe simple to say, but it comes down to player execution, right? Like, you can scheme up whatever you want, but if you're not executing, and missing guys, or like letting it happen too much, it's like, well, then we are going to have to play a little soft on them, right? So I think the execution has been very well, which is why it has worked so damn well the past few weeks. Now, that was a huge weakness, right? How is IU's front 5 going to handle, these types of pressures? And that was a big question heading into the week. And clearly they can't, right? That's just the athlete difference sometimes. You can maybe handle the 4-man pressure, but yeah, when you start throwing 6, 7 in there, it's like, yeah, good luck. So I don't know what that'll look like when you play some more, competent defensive lines that can hold their own a little more. But yeah, I think it comes down. I think Cody Simon and Sonny Styles and everyone's just been doing their job. I don't think that there's been from an execution standpoint, I don't think that there's been a weakness on this team, because there's some penalties on Iggy, or on the defense, I should say, but you're going to have those. And I think everybody else has done their job, and I think Iggy's done a good job outside of those. So,
I completely agree. The linebacker play, I think, has been so much more consistent. We talked there for a couple of weeks where it was like, do the linebackers know what the defensive line is doing? And does the defensive line know what the linebackers are doing? Yeah. That hasn't felt like the case for the last, 3-4 weeks. It seems like it's been a much more kind of well-oiled machine. Cody Simon playing at a really high level, Sonny Styles playing at a really high level. I think that allows Jim Knowles to really be confident in firing off those pressures and trusting in his guys to get home, and trusting on his guys, on the outside to maintain coverage long enough to not get burned. So I'm super happy with it. You look at Curtis Rourke, he was averaging 260 yards in the air over his last 4 games. And one of those games was Nebraska. He didn't even play a full game. He had 186 in that game, so could have been much more. He goes 8 for 18 for 68 yards, and you've got Curt Cignetti basically saying, every time we tried to throw the ball, something bad happened. So it felt like something was not, something bad was going to happen. So completely took IU out of what they wanted to do. And being a top 5 matchup, to be able to say that at the end of the day of we took a offense that really likes to throw the ball, that really, puts their faith in their QB for an opposing head coach to just basically be like, we couldn't. We physically couldn't. I think that says a lot about this Buckeye defense and should give them a lot of confidence going into, this home stretch of games where it's kind of, win or go home from this point.
Yeah. Yep. No, not a lot of notes here. I think, again, very happy with the performance on the defensive side of the ball. They've held their own. And I mean, same goes for the offense, right? They've held they've done more than enough. So I think this is like the best version of the Buckeyes I've seen since 1920. Like those 2 seasons, like just the missing. There was always an imbalance somewhere, and it feels like there is a balance. One side can pick up the other side.
Yep,
that's the best version you can be. There's a lot of teams out there, and I think this is the best year to do it, right? Because there's a lot of teams out there that are either one-sided or just have some glaring weaknesses. And I think at this point it just comes down to coaching. Player execution, of course, but like I think it comes down to the coaching. Like Chip Kelly and Jim Knowles need to keep going. Got to keep finding those extra opportunities, whether that's from special teams or trick plays or whatever it is, right? I think that there's a lot that's still to be unlocked for this team because yes, there's been 3 top 5 matchups, but outside of that, the competition hasn't been that difficult. So you haven't had to show everything, which is a good thing. And seems like the Buckeyes are in a good spot heading into this week. But it is rivalry week. It's the game.
It is the game. Michigan coming off of probably their best win of the season, in my opinion. A 50-6 just complete routing of Northwestern, who the Buckeyes just played. We kind of know they're not, not great. Michigan is at home in that game, but I think it gives them a little bit more confidence heading into this matchup than if they go out and play one of those nasty 24-10 games that seems like they've caught themselves in all year against bad teams. Buckeyes, is it sitting at 20? Is it 20 and a half?
Last I saw on FanDuel was 20 and a half a few hours ago. So
yeah. So sitting at 20 and a half, this is one of those games where like it would just take a colossal failure from Ohio State on both sides of the ball for Michigan to come out on top, in my opinion. Just on paper, when you look at these 2 rosters, they're going to be without Will Johnson. Like, they're just not the same team that we've played the last 10 years. And I'm not even going to say, the last 5. Like there hasn't been a team, I think, this inept from Michigan side. But it's the game, and anything can happen anytime you step on the field. They really are playing with nothing to lose. Their entire season would be, in the eyes of Michigan fans right now is, you go win that game. We don't give 2 shits that you lost 5. Like,
oh yeah.
Who cares? You're still our heroes. So Ohio State has a job to do. I hope this is a Ryan Day steps on their neck and doesn't stop. And that it's just ugly, all day long for them. How are you feeling going into it? Given the last 3 years, given, what's ahead of the Buckeyes and kind of their hopes and dreams with Michigan standing right in the way of that, how do you feel going into this?
Oh, I'm on edge a little bit. I was on edge a lot of last week too, right? Heading in, all the way until the second half, basically on edge for that one. And, but there's I look at common opponents and their performances against common opponents, right? IU, they lost to Oregon big time, barely beat Michigan State. I think Northwestern clearly both took care of business there. So I look at that, and then I think the biggest thing that I look at is the leader of this team. That's Will Howard. This dude is and it's not just Will. There's Jack Sawyer. There's some other guys that are coming out, but the energy that leader for this team is heading into this week with gives me the more confidence than anything else that you can point to, because I think that has been one of the missing pieces. That was maybe the missing piece last year, was leader confidence, because a lot of these leaders had been broken. The quarterback wasn't necessarily a natural born leader like a Will Howard is. And that was probably the difference in that game. And, the 2 years prior, that those were talented teams, and there were maybe some other shenanigans going on. But I do think that gives me a lot of confidence, on top of we're clearly more dominant on both sides of the ball. I think Ryan Day has learned some things. We have Chip Kelly. We have Jim Knowles at his best. I think this is a big step on their neck, and like, do not take the foot off the gas at all. Like,
it's funny. I think we talked about this at some point in time early on in the season, that like there were talks around, people that were close to the Buckeyes, that the team was maybe just too nice and like quiet. There weren't a lot of like super outspoken, like it was a lot of guys that were just business. You think of like Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, Emeka Ibuka, like they're not the big flashy, like, talking shit all game kind of guys. It feels like Will Howard has kind of taken that role. You talk about the leadership, but also like we're the Ohio State Buckeyes. We're better than you. We're going to play 60 minutes. The sneak at the end of the game, and him, putting out a cigarette on the side the sidelines. I'm like, I know a lot of people aren't going to like that, but I love it. Like I love the fact that we have a QB that, one, transferred in here. He's only been here for 9 months, maybe, and he's like supremely confident and just wants nothing more than to win for Ohio State, for the seniors that are on this team. He's talked about it all year. And like you said, he's really leaned into like, I'm the leader of this team, and like, we're going to go as far as I go. And he's walking that walk right now. So I think that is, like you said, a massive difference going into this Michigan game versus last year, where we're like, X's and O's and talent wise, we feel we match up really well with them. Do we think we have like the guy that we're 100% confident is going to go make the play when he needs to make the play, and like lead this team in the huddle, in the locker room, at halftime? We didn't have that. I think we have it this year, which is why I feel really confident about, the Buckeyes this upcoming weekend, but also just in the long run for the Buckeyes. So yeah, I do think that's a big differentiator. And I think, you mentioned it, like the Jack Sawyers, the JTTs, the Emeka Ibuka, like this game means a lot to them. This is going to be the biggest game that they've played in their career, even though it's a game against a 6-5 team and kind of like, but this is the biggest game they've played in their career. And I think they're going to show up and play with a lot of energy and passion, and leave Buckeye fans with a good memory of them, which won't be the case if they don't do that.
Well, this game this completely hinders them from achieving their goal, whether or not they achieve their goals, right? If they lose this game, you lose the rivalry game, you don't go to the Big Ten championship, and you're a 2-loss team that doesn't completely control their destiny in the college football playoff. Now, again, what can they go do? I think they're still extremely talented, and this just may be, there's still a national championship hope there. But if you win this game, you check one box immediately, and then you go to Indianapolis and you have an opportunity to check another box, and then you have the most confidence that you've ever had in the past 5. I don't even know. More confidence, I think, than you did with Justin Fields. Maybe since you beat Alabama in 2014.
I was going to say, it's going to be since 2014. The second after Zeke scored up the middle was probably the last time we would feel that confident. So no, I completely agree. I can't stress enough of like, this can't be a look ahead game. No. And I don't think that anybody in that building for a second will ever treat this game, regardless of how bad each team is in any given year. I'm curious your thoughts on this, and to just kind of switch away from Michigan and like talking about the goals of the team, what's ahead of them. I was kind of, I was pretty non-committal on the Will Howard sneak at the end of the game. Like Travion going down at the 1 yard line kind of felt like a, hey, we can score on you whenever we want. We'll go down here and walk out. Will Howard rushes in. I like it personally, just because Cignetti had been talking a lot. He scores, goes for 2, kicks an onside kick. Like, he wasn't quitting, but everybody wants the Buckeyes to quit. Do you think that there was also a piece of that was like, Will Howard tallies another touchdown, ends the day with 3 touchdowns. He's got a chance to go knock off a rival, which they haven't done, which is going to be a big like perception game. So if he goes out and plays well, and then he has a 1v2 matchup against Dylan Gabriel in Oregon, which if he wins, like in my opinion, that touchdown kind of felt like I don't think this is probably what they're thinking, but I think it will end up coming back to it of like, let's pad the stats a little bit.
Yep.
And let's see if we can get Will Howard to New York. Do you think that is at all in the back of the mind of Ryan Day and Will Howard at this point? Or do you think, given that it's basically down to Travis Hunter and Ashton Genty, and it doesn't seem like anybody else is going to be able to do enough over the next 2 weeks to get them off of that kind of knock them off the betting favorite? Do you think they care at all, or do you think it would be good for Ryan Day to show, hey, show QBs, show these guys that like, hey, we can get you to New York? It's been a while since we've had, somebody in that conversation. It feels like, CJ Stroud was there, but I'm curious, like, do you think that is at all in the back of their minds right now?
Absolutely. I thought that when they scored that. So like, we're on the same page. Okay. I thought that when they decided that, okay, and maybe they didn't want Trey to go down. Maybe that was just a Travion Henderson decision.
That's just Travion
I'm
Henderson,
just going to go down.
Yeah. That's just Travion being Travion. Like, that's...
But then when it's like, we're at the 1 yard line, I think there's 2 things that they accomplished that. One is the Heisman candidacy. Is that the moment? No. But does that pad the stats? Yes.
Yeah.
2, like, you got to try that out because you got stopped on 4th and 1. You're with a new center. You got to try that play out. You're given a perfect opportunity to do that because that is something, again, when the margins are thin.
It was the ball was on the exact same spot as where we got stuffed, and everybody in the world was saying, why didn't you put your 6'5" QB under center and just sneak it? Because he's averaging like 5 yards a gain on sneaks. Yeah. So I think there were multiple things to it. And like, I do think the talk about Cignetti, the hype, and the, his first comment being that, Purdue sucks and so does Ohio State and Michigan. Like, people remember those things. And I think it sent a little bit of a message of like, let's calm down a little bit. Like, you're not there yet. You've had a great year, but like, you're not quite there yet. So I didn't mind it, but my first thought went to like, that kind of feels a little bit like let's pad his stats a little bit if we can. Let's get a QB to New York, even though, like I said, it would take a miracle, I think, for Will Howard to win it. But
I mean, hey, if he goes and has a 6 touchdown performance and then also wins the Big Ten championship, I mean, yes, very hard hill.
It would take I think it would take 4 or 5 touchdowns against Michigan, and then I think it would take like a Heisman moment against Oregon, like
a 40-yard game changing drive.
Yeah,
or 40
I don't think it can just
touchdown.
be like a Will Howard threw for 250 and 3 touchdowns, and they won. Like, I think it's going to have to be, Ohio State's down 4, and Will Howard throws a perfect ball to Jeremiah Smith down the sideline to go ahead. Like, that's what it would take, I think, to elevate him into this guy could actually win it. Especially, Colorado has an interesting game this weekend. are you going to send a Travis Hunter? Like, you'll send him, but does he just hands down win it if it's a 4-loss Colorado team? Like, if Ashton Genty, I think it becomes interesting. Heisman's traditionally been a quarterback's award, and traditionally it's the team with the best team in the country that ends up having somebody there and somebody pretty high up in the voting. So I had the argument with some buddies that aren't Ohio State fans, and they're like, "There's no way he's not going to touch New York. Like, it doesn't matter what he does from here." I'm like, he's fifth right now in betting odds behind Dylan Gabriel.
Yeah, he has an opportunity to have the better game and win and be the better team. Yeah. So no, I think that there's at the end of the day, if you're the only quarterback to go there, that's huge for recruiting and also just like recognition as a whole, right? For Ryan Day or Will Howard, whatever. But yeah, I certainly think that whoever has the better game in Indianapolis, I think will be the third candidate.
Yeah, it's going to go. Yeah. I think whoever wins in that game is going to be the fourth.
Yes.
Yeah, yes. The fourth one to go. Like, even if Will Howard completely balls out or Dylan Gabriel balls out and they lose, like, I still think it's going to go to the other person as that fourth person, with like Cam Ward being the other QB that's going to be present.
Right.
All right. I know we're right at 46 minutes. We said we were going to try and do 30 minutes, but man, talking about that win and then talking about the game is big time. Outside of existing Buckeye, players and matchups, there's been a lot of things happening on the recruiting trail. I think the biggest thing for the Buckeyes is you had David Sanders Jr. present at that game on Saturday, in what I'm, from what I'm hearing, is probably the best environment that Ohio State has had in a long time, which I think goes a long way. And there's rumors that he may be coming back for the game.
Dude. Lock it up if he's coming back to the game.
Yeah, if you go back to back, that feels like you beat a top 5 team. The environment's fun. The environment's going to be really fun next week. He's going to be around the game and kind of understand the meaning behind it. I think that's one of the best selling points for both programs, is like this matchup every year. You go win that big, it feels like we're going to pretty quickly hear a Fong bomb of David Sanders Jr. is, predicted to flip to Ohio State.
Yeah, I'm just double checking 24/7 Sports right now just to make sure I didn't miss anything. But there's a lot of smoke and a lot of like Tennessee insiders that are like, there's a very high likelihood he flips to Ohio State. So
I've seen things that like I think he's interested in med school, and his parents are like blown away by Ohio State's medical, program, which is one of the best in the country. So it seems like there's a lot of good things going, and also he's probably going to come in and be the guy day one. You think? I mean,
dude, yeah, absolutely. He's unless Josh Simmons decide he would go to right tackle in that case, right? Do the or left guard and be the Paris Johnson, equivalent for his freshman year, but. Dude, can you imagine if Justin Fry pulls this off with what he has done, losing his 2 best offensive linemen? Maybe Jackson's up there, but like losing his 2 best, having to reshape the offensive line basically 3 times now. Like,
and then locking down of the talk from people like us of like, like, what are you doing? How are we missing out on these guys? Like, what do we have to do to go land these top tier recruits? If he's able to pull this off, everybody's going to have to go on a little bit of an apology tour of like, hey, our bad. You got this. We'll shut up and be fans. You continue to recruit at a high level and put us in a position to be successful in the future. If I'm Julian saying, I'm going and standing by him the entire game of just like, please, for the love of God, come here. And we'll win so many football games, with each other. So that's exciting. You mentioned earlier the offered prediction from Fong that he's possibly flipping to Auburn. Was he at that game this weekend?
Yes.
So
I think he's been to Auburn like 4 times this year, and he has
Yeah.
not been to Ohio State yet. Now, there's a chance. I think Berm from the podcast seems like there's suggestions that he'll visit for this weekend, but there's also been a lot of talk of him being there for the Iron Bowl with Bama.
I knew that was back and forth of, which direction he was going to go. We talked about that, I think, early on, of like, if he's going to the Iron Bowl, I don't know if you necessarily, do you want the guy to come be a Buckeye if he doesn't have any interest in coming and watching the game? Like those aren't typically the guys that you have a ton of confidence are going to stick around anyways. Not in today's age of college football. So, all right, I'm excited. God, it feels good to be at this time of year. Like, it sucks that the season is getting to that point where like we're not going to have college football here in a couple months, but man, it's going to be exciting with 1 week to play SEC championship, ACC championship, Big Ten championship. Like the margin of error for a lot of teams right now to get into the college football playoffs is very, very, very slim. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun to watch over the next 2 weeks.
Ton of fun, dude. This has like been part of it's that we're doing a podcast. We're talking about the Buckeyes more than we ever have in our lives, but like the past 12 months of it, like we're getting,
it's been so much fun.
Oh my God, dude. This is just the roller coaster that it has been, and like how uphill it has been most of the time has been, I'm excited for what we have left, and a huge opportunity to like, it's been a long, I forget how 1,000 something days since the last time I felt just the pure excitement after or during the game. So
I don't think enough can be said about the job Ryan Day did after that loss to Missouri of going and getting Seth McLaughlin, Caleb Downs, and Quinshon Judkins. We're having, I think, a much different conversation at this point in the year if those 3 guys aren't in a Buckeye uniform. So to be where we are right now is incredible. And like I said, it's a year-long job for Ryan Day, and he knocked it out of the park in the offseason by bringing in some of this talent. And obviously guys like Jeremiah Smith, committing to play here and having a really good season, like a tremendous bounce back from what was pretty dark days last January.
It was pretty sad.
So it's exciting. A lot of work left to do for the Buckeyes. Score prediction for Saturday. I'm going to make you give one.
Okay. 49-10.
Okay. 42. I'm going to go 42-17.
Okay.
And one of them is going to be like the same exact touchdowns we've given up to other teams. It's going to be one of those junk, end of the game.
Yeah.
Something stupid. But I've got 42-17.
Do you feel like the game is ever in the balance past like the first 2 or 3 drives? Or is that like Buckeyes in full control scoring on their first 3 or 4 possessions?
I think you're going to see us come out and score our first possession, and I think you're going to see a big stop, and everybody's going to do this big okay. That's kind of my prediction. I'm not saying it's just going to be like we pile it on in the first quarter and everybody's heading for the interstate by the end of the third quarter. I think it's just going to be one of those like dominant from start to finish. A couple slip ups, like I said, 17 points with something coming junky in the fourth quarter is kind of my prediction. But I think you maybe head into the half like 24-7, and everybody's like, okay, feel pretty good.
Okay, love it. All right. Well, we will be back to recap it and then hopefully be talking about a trip to Indianapolis and then the college football playoffs. So thank you everybody for listening and watching, and we'll see you guys.